The Galactic Councils dismissaled the crystalline spires of the Galactic Trade Council. Headquarters caught the light of 3 suns as delegates from across known space gathered for their quarterly session. Ambassador Xyleth of the Zarian Collective adjusted his translucent form, light refracting through his body in patterns that indicated mild amusement. Today's agenda included the routine review of the Human Isolation Decree, a formality that had been rubber-stamped for the past 15 years. Order, order, called Director Khan, his scaled hide shifting from deep green to authoritative purple. The Vorthok military leader had overseen these sessions for decades, and his patience for theatrical displays had worn thin long ago. We come to Agenda Item 777, Alpha, Review of Human Isolation, Decree, Standard Cycle 15. A ripple of what could generously be called laughter echoed through the chamber. The Zephyrian delegates' gaseous forms swirled in patterns, indicating derision, while the insectoid hive queen's compound eyes glittered with what her species considered humor. Even the normally stoic Titanium Brotherhood representatives allowed their mechanical faces to display the equivalent of smirks. "Surely we're not still maintaining this charade," buzzed the Hive Queen, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000,000 minds speaking as one. The humans were always primitive, slow, weak. They couldn't even leave their home system without our technology. Ambassador Xyleth stepped forward, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's lights into rainbow patterns. The Zarian Collective has run extensive psychological evaluations on human behavior patterns. They are predictable to a fault, emotional, irrational. They lack the logical frameworks necessary for complex galactic politics. His form shimmered with satisfaction. Frankly, the decree was unnecessary. They would have isolated themselves eventually through their own incompetence. Director Khan's crest flared slightly. The Vorthok remembered differently. Human soldiers served alongside ours during the border conflicts. They were adequate fighters. Nothing spectacular, but they followed orders and maintained acceptable survival rates. "Exactly my point," interjected the Etherian representative, her energy-based form pulsing with dismissive patterns. "Adequate, acceptable. These are not the qualities we seek in galactic citizens." While Vorthok warriors can tear through battle armor with their claws, while Zarian strategists can calculate battlefield probabilities in nanoseconds, while the Hive Queens can coordinate millions of units simultaneously, humans simply exist. They muddle through with primitive determination and stubborn refusal to acknowledge their limitations. More laughter filled the chamber. The human delegation, consisting of a single elderly woman in a simple grey uniform, sat quietly in the observation gallery. Captain Elena Rodriguez had been Earth's last official representative before the decree, and she maintained her vigil more out of habit than hope. "The motion before us is simple," Khan continued, his voice carrying military precision. "Do we extend the Human Isolation Decree for another 5-year term, or do we finally acknowledge that it serves no purpose and simply make their exile permanent?" "Permanent," called out the Zephyrian delegate. "Agreed," chimed the crystalline collective. "The hive concurs," buzzed the insectoid queen. One by one, species after species voiced their agreement. Humans were relics of a more primitive time, unsuited for the complex realities of galactic civilization. Better to let them remain in their isolated corner of space, playing with their simple technologies and basic philosophies as the votes accumulated. A soft chime echoed through the chamber. A figure emerged from the shadows near the archive section, moving with the slow, measured pace of extreme age. The delegates fell silent as they recognized archive keeper Morvac, an ethereal being so ancient that some questioned whether he had been present at the formation of the council itself. "Before you make this vote permanent," Morvac said, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested vast wisdom and hidden sadness, "perhaps you should understand why the decree was truly implemented." Director Khan's crest flattened against his skull, a sign of unease among his species. "Archive Keeper, the official records are clear. The humans were isolated following the Titan Station incident when their emotional volatility led to ... complications." "Official records," Morvac repeated, his energy form brightening with what might have been amusement. "Yes, I wrote those official records. Deliberately vague, classified at the highest levels. Tell me, Director Khan, do any of you actually remember what humans accomplished during the Forgotten War?" The chamber fell silent. The Forgotten War was exactly that, a conflict so traumatic that most species had collectively chosen to purge it from their histories. Only fragments remained in the deepest archives, and even those were heavily redacted. That was over a century ago, Ambassador Xyleth protested, his crystalline form flickering with uncertainty. "Ancient history, irrelevant to current considerations, is it?" Morvac drifted closer to the center of the chamber. 3 days ago, we detected distress signals from the Void Sector, the same energy signatures we encountered during the Forgotten War. The enemy we thought we had destroyed forever is returning. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. The Void Sector had been quarantined for over a century, its entire region declared off-limits to all galactic traffic. No one spoke of what lay beyond that boundary, what had been so terrible that an entire section of space had been abandoned. "Impossible," whispered the Hive Queen, her compound eyes dulling with fear. "The Devourers were eliminated. The combined fleets of 50 worlds confirmed it." "The combined fleets of 50 worlds," Morvac agreed, led by human tactical coordination. "Humans who displayed capabilities that terrified you so much that you chose to forget they ever existed." His form began to pulse with patterns of data. "Retrieval. Shall I refresh your memories?" Without waiting for permission, Morvac activated the chamber's holographic systems. The air above the delegates shimmered, then resolved into military footage from over a century past. The image quality was grainy, the technology primitive by current standards, but the content was unmistakable. The first scene showed a massive space station, easily the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that dwarfed anything in the current galactic arsenal. Around it, a fleet of dark ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Devourer, Command Station, Omega," Morvac narrated. "Shielded by technology we still don't understand. Defended by automated fleets that adapted to our tactics faster than we could develop new ones. For 3 years, the combined might of the galactic military threw everything we had at it. 50 worlds worth of our finest warriors, our most advanced technology, our most brilliant tactical minds." The footage showed battle after battle, Vorthok heavy assault cruisers being torn apart by weapons that seemed to ignore their armor. Zerian supercomputers being outmaneuvered by enemy AI systems that learned and adapted in real-time. Hive Queen. Coordination networks being disrupted and turned against themselves. "For 3 years, we failed," Morvac continued. "We were losing the war, losing entire sectors to an enemy that consumed everything in its path. Our projections indicated complete galactic conquest within 5 years. Then the humans volunteered for Operation Last Light. The scene shifted to show a small fleet of human ships. By galactic standards, They were pathetic, cobbled together from salvaged parts, held together with what appeared to be primitive welding and sheer determination. The largest vessel was barely a fraction of the size of a Vorthok destroyer. Ambassador Xyloth's form flickered with confusion. This is what defeated the Devourers. This collection of scrap metal. Not the ships, Morvac replied quietly. The crews. The footage zoomed in on one of the human vessels. Through the viewports, they could see the crew beings who looked nothing like the elegant, evolved species that now populated the galaxy. They were small, soft, covered in what appeared to be primitive fabric rather than natural armor or energy fields. Their technology was crude, their weapons outdated. Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Defiance, Morvac, identified a figure on the screen. Age 37, standard years. No genetic modifications, no cybernetic enhancements, no psychic abilities, no natural armor, weapons, or enhanced physical capabilities. The human captain was speaking to her crew, though the audio was too degraded to make out words. Her gestures were animated, her expression intense. Around her, other humans were working with frantic energy, modifying equipment with tools that looked ancient by galactic standards. "What are they doing?" asked the Etherian representative. "Something no other species had considered," Morvac answered. "They weren't trying to overpower the Devourer technology. They weren't attempting to outthink their adaptive systems. They were doing something completely irrational." The footage continued, showing the human fleet approaching the Devourer command station. The massive alien fortress immediately responded, launching wave after wave of automated defenders. The human ships began taking damage immediately, their primitive shields failing under the assault. "This is suicide," muttered Director Khan, asterisk. "This is suicide," muttered Director Khan. "That's what we thought," Morvac agreed. "We were watching from the command ship, preparing to record the final failure of galactic resistance. Then Captain Chen did something unprecedented. On screen, the human ships suddenly scattered in what appeared to be complete chaos. There was no pattern to their movement, no tactical formation. They seemed to be flying randomly, some ships even firing on empty space. "Panic," diagnosed the Hive Queen. Their inferior minds cracked under pressure. "Watch closer," Morvac instructed. As the delegates observed more carefully, they began to notice something strange. The Devourer defensive systems, which had adapted to every previous attack, seemed confused. Their tracking systems were following the random human movements, but failing to predict them. Weapons that had been devastatingly accurate against organized formations were missing targets that shouldn't have been able to dodge. The Devourer's greatest strength was their ability to analyze and counter enemy tactics, Morvac explained. They could predict the optimal moves of any rational opponent. They could adapt to any logical strategy. But humans weren't being rational or logical. They were being ... human. On screen, one of the smaller human vessels suddenly changed course and flew directly into what appeared to be a solid wall of enemy fire. Instead of being destroyed, it somehow weaved through the barrage, its pilot performing maneuvers that violated several laws of physics and all principles of tactical doctrine. "Impossible," breathed Ambassador Xyloth. The pilot of that ship was a former civilian cargo hauler named Marcus Webb, Morvac continued. "No military training, no enhanced reflexes. When we interviewed him after the battle, he said he was just flying by instinct, responding to feelings he couldn't explain." The human ships continued their seemingly chaotic assault. Each crew was operating independently, making decisions that appeared random but somehow worked. They were using outdated weapons in combinations that shouldn't have been effective, employing tactics that no military academy would teach, and somehow achieving results that defied analysis. They weren't following any doctrine because they didn't have a doctrine, Morvac explained. They were making it up as they went along, adapting faster than even the Devourer systems could track. Every human crew was essentially improvising, their own unique approach to the battle. The footage showed the moment when the human fleet finally reached the command station itself. Instead of conducting a coordinated assault on the obvious weak points, they attacked seemingly random sections of the station's hull. Some used conventional weapons, others had jury-rigged devices that shouldn't have functioned, and a few appeared to be using nothing more than basic tools and explosives. The Devourer defense grid was designed to handle organized attacks from predictable opponents, Morvac said. It couldn't process what the humans were doing because what they were doing made no tactical sense. One by one, the human boarding parties began to penetrate the station's hull. The internal security systems, which had repelled every previous invasion attempt, found themselves facing opponents who didn't follow the expected patterns of behavior. Security drone programming assumed intruders would take cover when fired upon. Morvac narrated as they watched a human soldier charge directly toward an automated turret, using nothing but a primitive projectile weapon and what appeared to be desperate determination. This human, Sergeant Maria Santos, had never encountered adaptive AI before. She fought it like it was a wild animal from her homeworld. The turret, designed to counter tactical military responses, found itself being attacked by someone who was treating it like a dangerous but ultimately defeatable predator. The human soldier used techniques that were part combat training, part animal handling, and part pure instinct. She disabled a system that had stopped entire Vorthok assault teams, Morvac observed. Not through superior technology or enhanced abilities, but through a combination of desperation, creativity, and absolute refusal to accept defeat. The chamber had fallen completely silent. Every delegate was staring at the footage in growing amazement. The humans weren't stronger, faster, or smarter than the other galactic species, but they were doing something none of the others had been able to achieve. They were winning through sheer unpredictability. The final phase of the operation lasted 17 hours, Morvac concluded. 17 hours of human crews fighting through a station designed to be impregnable, using nothing but outdated equipment and innovative thinking. When they finally reached the command core, the footage showed the interior of the Devourer command center, a vast chamber filled with technology that even now remained incomprehensible to galactic science. Standing in the center were 3 human figures, their primitive spacesuits torn and patched, their weapons obviously cobbled together from salvaged parts. Captain Chen, Sergeant Santos, and Engineer David Park, Morvac identified them. They had fought their way through the most advanced defensive system ever encountered, and now they faced the command AI itself. The final scene showed the 3 humans working together to plant what appeared to be a primitive nuclear device in the heart of the alien system. As alarms blared and automated defenses closed in around them, they calmly completed their task. The Devour Command AI tried to communicate with them in those final moments, Morvac said quietly. It wanted to understand how they had succeeded where entire fleets had failed. Captain Chen's response was recorded in the station's databanks. The audio quality was poor, but Captain Chen's voice carried clearly through the chamber. We didn't succeed because we're better than you. We succeeded because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten. The explosion that followed vaporized the command station and triggered a cascade failure that destroyed the entire Devourer fleet. The war that had threatened to consume the galaxy ended in a blinding flash of primitive human explosives. As the footage faded, Archive Keeper Morvac turned to address the stunned delegates. That is why humans were truly isolated, not because they were inadequate, but because they were unpredictable. They didn't follow the rules of engagement because they didn't know the rules existed. They achieved impossible victories because they didn't understand that what they were attempting was impossible. The chamber remained silent for long moments. Finally, Director Khan spoke, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. The official records state that the war ended due to a coordinated multi-species assault. The official records were written to preserve galactic morale, Morvac replied. The truth was too disturbing. How do you explain to advanced civilizations that the most primitive species in the galaxy accomplished what they could not? How do you maintain social order when your citizens learn that intelligence, technology, and evolution matter less than stubborn determination and creative desperation? Ambassador Xylith's crystalline form had dimmed considerably, so the isolation decree was implemented to prevent humans from disrupting the established order. Morvac confirmed. Their methods were effective, but they were also chaotic, unpredictable. They couldn't be controlled or directed like proper military assets. They made decisions based on intuition rather than data, on emotion rather than logic. They were dangerous precisely because they were so primitive. In the observation gallery, Captain Elena Rodriguez had remained silent throughout the revelation. Now she stood slowly, her elderly frame straight despite her years. When she spoke, her voice carried across the chamber with surprising strength. Archive Keeper Morvac speaks the truth. I was there, on the Defiance. I was Captain Chen's communications officer. She paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. But he's left out one important detail. All eyes turned to the human representative. Director Khan leaned forward. What detail? Captain Rodriguez smiled, and for the first time, the delegates saw something in her expression that hadn't been there before. Not defiance, not anger, but a quiet confidence that somehow seemed more unsettling than either would have been. The distress signals from the void sector aren't random transmissions, she said calmly. We've been monitoring them for 3 days. They're coordinated, organized. The Devourers didn't just return, they learned from their defeat. They're coming back with adaptations specifically designed to counter the tactics that destroyed them before. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. If the Devourers had returned and adapted to human unpredictability, then the same tactics that had won the war might not work again. How long do we have? Whispered the Hive Queen. Captain Rodriguez checked a device on her wrist. A simple chronometer that looked ancient compared to the sophisticated equipment surrounding her. According to our calculations, their advanced scouts should reach the Outer Rim territories in approximately 6 months. The main fleet will arrive within 2 years. Then we have time to prepare, Director Khan said, his military instincts taking over. We can mobilize the combined fleets, implement the strategies that worked before, ... The strategies that failed before, you mean, Captain Rodriguez corrected gently. Archive Keeper Morvac showed you the battles leading up to Operation Last Light. Your conventional approaches didn't work then, and they won't work now. The Devourers have had a century to analyze the data from their defeat. They'll be ready for anything predictable. The chamber erupted in desperate conversation as delegates began calculating fleet movements, resource allocations, and tactical possibilities. But Captain Rodriguez remained standing, waiting patiently for them to reach the obvious conclusion. Finally, Ambassador Xyloth's form stopped flickering and focused on the human representative. "You're suggesting that we need human assistance again." "I'm not suggesting anything," Captain Rodriguez replied. "I'm simply observing that the galaxy faces the same threat that nearly destroyed it before, and the same solutions that failed before will fail again. The choice of how to respond is entirely yours." Director Khan's crest was now fully flattened against his skull. "The human isolation decree has been in effect for 15 years. Even if we were to lift it immediately, how do we know your people would be willing to help? How do we know they're even capable of helping? It's been over a century since the Forgotten War. Do humans still possess the same ... qualities that made them effective?" Captain Rodriguez's smile widened slightly. "Why don't you ask them yourself?" The revelation and redemption before anyone could respond to Captain Rodriguez's suggestion. The chamber's communication systems activated without authorization. The main holographic display, which had been showing the archival footage moments before, flickered and resolved into a new image. The face that appeared was unmistakably human, weathered, middle-aged, with eyes that held the same quiet confidence they had just witnessed in Captain Rodriguez. Behind the figure, they could see what appeared to be a starship bridge, bustling with activity. "Galactic Council," the figure said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's speakers. "This is Admiral James Mitchell of the Terran Deep Space Fleet. We've been monitoring your session." The delegates stared in stunned silence. The human isolation decree had specifically prohibited human vessels from entering galactic communication networks. The fact that they were receiving this transmission meant either the humans had developed technology capable of bypassing galactic security, or they had been watching all along. "Admiral Mitchell," Director Khan finally managed, his voice strained. "How are you able to communicate with us? The isolation protocols should prevent any human signals from reaching Council space." Admiral Mitchell's expression suggested mild amusement. "Director Khan, you're operating under the assumption that we actually obeyed the isolation decree. Did you really think we would abandon galactic space simply because you asked us to?" Ambassador Xyloth's crystalline form flickered rapidly, indicating extreme agitation. "Impossible. Our monitoring systems would have detected human vessels. We have sensor networks throughout the galaxy." "You have sensor networks designed to detect conventional starships following conventional flight patterns." The Admiral agreed. "We stopped using conventional anything about a week after the decree was implemented." The implications were staggering. For 15 years, the galactic community had assumed that humans had retreated to their home system and remained there. The possibility that they had been operating in galactic space all along, undetected, suggested capabilities that no one had suspected. "Where are you?" demanded the Hive Queen, her compound eyes darting as if she expected human ships to decloak. "Around the Council station." "We're everywhere," Admiral Mitchell replied simply. "We've spent 15 years learning everything we could about galactic civilization from the outside looking in. We know your trade routes, your military capabilities, your political structures, your technological developments. We've been watching, listening, and preparing." Archive Keeper Morvac drifted forward, his ancient energy form pulsing with what might have been approval. "Preparing for what, Admiral?" "For the day you would need us again," Mitchell answered. "Captain Rodriguez, how much did you tell them about the Void Sector signals?" Captain Rodriguez, still standing in the observation gallery, consulted her. "Chronometer again. I told them they have 6 months before the scouts arrive, 2 years before the main fleet." Admiral Mitchell nodded grimly. That's the optimistic scenario. Our deep space monitoring stations detected something 3 hours ago that changes the timeline considerably. The holographic display shifted to show a star chart of the galactic rim. Pulsing red indicators marked dozens of locations along what had once been the quarantine boundary of the Void Sector. Devourer probe ships, Mitchell explained. They're not just scouting, they're establishing forward bases. The main invasion force isn't 2 years away. Our revised estimates give us 6 weeks at most. The chamber erupted in chaos. 6 weeks was barely enough time to mobilize a single sector fleet, let alone coordinate a galactic defense. Delegates began shouting orders to their home governments, demanding fleet positions and resource assessments. Director Khan's voice cut through the noise with military authority. Order, Admiral Mitchell, what are your people's capabilities? How many ships can you field? The human admiral's expression became carefully neutral. Director, you're thinking in conventional terms again. The question isn't how many ships we can field, it's whether you're prepared to accept the way we intend to fight this war. What do you mean? Asked Ambassador Zyleth. Instead of answering directly, Admiral Mitchell gestured to someone off-screen. The holographic display split, showing multiple viewpoints from what appeared to be different ships. Each view showed human crews working with equipment that looked nothing like standard galactic technology. Meet the Terran Irregular Fleet, Mitchell announced. We learned from the Forgotten War that conventional military doctrine isn't effective against adaptive enemies. So we threw out conventional doctrine entirely. The first view showed a ship that appeared to have been constructed from the hull of an old cargo freighter. Its weapons were obviously salvaged from multiple sources, welded together in configurations that violated every principle of starship design. The crew was working with focused intensity, making modifications even as they spoke. The improviser, Mitchell identified the vessel, captained by Elena Santos, daughter of Sergeant Maria Santos, who fought in the Forgotten War. Elena's specialty is real-time tactical adaptation. She's never fought the same battle twice. The second view showed an even more unusual vessel. It appeared to be built around a massive industrial fabrication unit, with construction arms and manufacturing equipment where most ships would mount weapons. The builder, Mitchell continued, Captain David Chen, grandson of Captain Sarah Chen. His ship doesn't fight enemies, it creates solutions. Need a weapon that doesn't exist. Give David an hour and a pile of scrap metal. The third view showed a ship that seemed to be in constant motion, even while stationary. Its hull was covered with what appeared to be experimental sensor arrays, and communication equipment, all jury-rigged together with typical human ingenuity. The Whisper, Mitchell said. Captain Lisa Park, great-niece of engineer David Park. She specializes in information warfare. If there's a signal to intercept, a code to break, or a system to infiltrate, Lisa will find a way. More ships appeared. On the display, each one unique. Each one representing a different approach to warfare that no military academy would recognize. Some looked like mobile workshops, others like flying laboratories, and a few appeared to be held together by nothing more than determination and creative welding. How many ships in total? Director Khan asked, his professional assessment of the fleet clearly struggling with what he was seeing. Asterisk. That's the wrong question, Admiral Mitchell replied. The right question is, how many different ways can we think of to solve the same problem? Because every human ship represents a different philosophy of combat, a different approach to survival, a different way of refusing to accept defeat. Ambassador Xylith's form brightened with sudden understanding. You're not planning to fight the Devourers ship to ship. You're planning to out-adapt them. Now you're beginning to understand, Mitchell confirmed. The Devourers' strength comes from their ability to analyze enemy tactics and develop counters faster than conventional forces can adapt. But what happens when every enemy ship uses completely different tactics? What happens when your opponents change their entire approach to warfare every time you encounter them? The implications were staggering. Instead of presenting the Devourers with predictable patterns to analyze and counter, the humans were planning to present them with chaos, organized chaos, but chaos nonetheless. This is madness, protested the Etherian representative. You can't coordinate a galactic defense with improvised tactics and jury-rigged equipment, can't we? Admiral Mitchell asked mildly. The display shifted again, showing a tactical simulation. Hundreds of red markers indicated Devourer forces advancing through a star system. Against them, a much smaller force of blue markers representing human ships began to respond. But instead of forming conventional battle lines or executing standard tactical maneuvers, the human ships scattered in what appeared to be random directions. Some moved toward the enemy, others away. A few began orbiting planetary bodies for no apparent strategic reason. Watch, Mitchell instructed. As the simulation progressed, the Devourer forces began to respond to the human movements. Their adaptive AI systems started calculating optimal responses, predicting human behavior patterns, and repositioning their forces accordingly. For the first few minutes, it appeared to be working. Then the human tactics began to change. Ships that had been retreating suddenly attacked. Vessels that had been orbiting planets revealed they had been laying minefields in impossible configurations. Units that appeared to be fleeing led Devourer forces into ambushes that shouldn't have been possible to coordinate. Each human captain is operating independently, Mitchell explained as the simulation continued. They're not following a master battle plan because there is no master battle plan. They're responding to immediate circumstances, making tactical decisions based on intuition, experience, and desperation. But how do you coordinate? Demanded Director Khan. How do you prevent friendly fire incidents? How do you achieve strategic objectives without unified command? We don't coordinate in the traditional sense, Mitchell admitted. We communicate. We share information. We respond to opportunities as they develop. But we don't try to control the chaos. We embrace it. The simulation reached its climax as the Devourer forces, having exhausted their adaptive capabilities, trying to counter dozens of different tactical approaches simultaneously, began to make critical errors. Their AI systems, designed to find optimal solutions to predictable problems, started to break down when faced with problems that had no optimal solutions. The beauty of human tactics, Mitchell concluded as the simulation ended with a human victory, is that they're not actually tactics at all. They're survival strategies developed by a species that spent millions of years adapting to environments that actively tried to kill them. Archive Keeper Morvac pulsed with approval. You've taken the lessons of the Forgotten War and built an entire philosophy around them. We've had 15 years to think about what worked and why, Mitchell confirmed. We've also had 15 years to prepare for the Devourer's return, because we knew they would return. Adaptive species always come back stronger. The chamber had grown quiet as delegates began to grasp the scope of what the humans were proposing. It wasn't just military assistance. It was a complete reimagining of how galactic defense could work. What do you need from us? Director Khan asked finally. Admiral Mitchell's expression became serious. Nothing. The response clearly wasn't what anyone expected. Ambassador Xyleth flickered with confusion. Nothing. You don't need resources, coordination with our fleets, access to our intelligence networks. We need you to stay out of our way, Mitchell said bluntly. Every time galactic forces try to coordinate with human operations, the results become predictable. Predictable tactics are exactly what the Devourers are designed to counter. So you're planning to fight this war alone? The Hive Queen asked. We're planning to fight this war the only way we know how, Mitchell corrected. Alone, in small groups. Making it up as we go along, and refusing to quit no matter how impossible the odds become. Captain Rodriguez spoke up from the observation gallery. But we're not asking you to sit idle. There's something you can do that's far more important than military coordination. What? Director Khan asked. Survive, she said simply. Protect your worlds, your peoples, your cultures. When this is over, and it will be over, the galaxy is going to need to rebuild. We need you to be there to rebuild it. Admiral Mitchell nodded agreement. The human role is to create chaos among the Devourer forces. Your role is to maintain order among galactic civilization. Both are necessary for victory. A new voice entered the conversation as another figure appeared on the holographic display. This was a woman in her 40s, wearing what appeared to be a modified combat suit that had been patched and repaired many times. Admiral, we're receiving the final scout reports, she announced. Devourer advance forces are moving faster than projected. Revised timeline is for weeks, not 6. Mitchell nodded grimly. Thank you, Commander Chen. He turned back to address the council. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted energy beings, we're out of time for debate. The Terran Irregular Fleet is deploying to intercept the Devourer advance. We'll buy you as much time as we can to implement whatever defensive measures you deem appropriate. Wait, Director Khan called out. The human isolation decree is still in effect. Technically, we haven't authorized human involvement in galactic affairs. Admiral Mitchell paused, then smiled with an expression that reminded every delegate of Captain Rodriguez's earlier confidence. Director, with all due respect, we stopped asking for permission 15 years ago. The decree isolated us from galactic politics, not from galactic responsibility. But if you act without council authorization, Ambassador Xyleth began, then you can put us on trial after we save your civilizations, Mitchell interrupted. Assuming, of course, that there are still civilizations left to hold trials. The transmission began to fade as Admiral Mitchell prepared to end the connection. But before the signal cut out entirely, he made one final statement. Archive Keeper Vac, you asked what humans accomplished during the Forgotten War. What we accomplished was proof that intelligence and technology aren't everything. Sometimes, the most advanced solution is knowing when to abandon advancement and embrace the chaos of simply refusing to give up. The holographic display went dark, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. After several minutes, Director Khan cleared his, through asterisk,